They say silence is golden, but in my family, silence was a prison. We lived in the biggest house in our estate in Abuja. We had 3 cars, 2 house helps, and a security guard who saluted my father every morning. But not once in my 25 years did I hear the sound of laughter echoing through those massive corridors. My parents were ghosts haunting their own lives. My mother spoke only to God. My father spoke to no one. They were wealthy, yes, but their hearts were starving. And I, Amara, was the princess of this silent, starving kingdom. When my mother died, the house didn't feel emptier, it just felt heavier. The doctors called it a protracted illness, but I watched her fade like a candle in a room with no oxygen. She simply gave up. At her funeral, the rain was the only thing that cried. My father stood there, a pillar of salt, his eyes as dry as a Lagos harmattan. And then, exactly 30 days later, he joined her. No warning, no final words, just a heart that decided it was tired of beating for nothing. I was left alone with the billions, the cars, and the silence so loud that it made my ears ring. Then came Auntie Ifoma. She didn't knock. She arrived like a storm. She was my mother's sister, a woman who had been erased from our family album years ago. While my parents were shadows, Ifoma was fire. She walked into that mansion and hissed at the marble floors. She didn't offer me a hug or a sorry for your loss. She sat me down in that cold kitchen and looked at me with eyes that could see through walls. Amara, she said, her voice like gravel. This house isn't empty. It's full of a debt you are about to inherit. You need to see where the silence began. We drove 4 hours into the bush to the village where my father was born. The ancestral home was a skeleton of its former self. We climbed stairs that groaned under our weight, up into an attic that smelled of 100 years of dust. There, in the corner, sat a trunk, brass-bound, ancient. It looked like it was holding its breath. Ifoma pointed a shaking finger at it. Your father found this when he was a struggling student, just like you were once. He wanted to change his life. He wanted to be a king, and he found a kingmaker. The key turned with a scream of rusted metal. Inside, there were no gold coins, no jewels, just a single piece of parchment, yellowed and smelling of old iron. I picked it up, and my skin crawled. The writing wasn't in English or Igbo. It was symbols that seemed to shift as I looked at them. At the bottom, a signature in dark brownish red, my father's name, signed in his own blood when he was only 21. A contract with a power that doesn't use banks, but with hearts. Ifoma's voice dropped to a whisper. The deal was simple, Amara. Infinite wealth. Every business he touched would turn to gold. Every contract would be his, but the price was the warmth. To keep the money, he had to vow never to show love, not to his wife and not to his child. The moment he felt or showed true affection to anyone, the wealth would vanish and the debt would be called in. He chose the money, Amara. He traded your childhood hugs for that mansion in Abuja. I stood in the library of our mansion, looking at the portrait of a man I realized I never truly knew. He wasn't a monster because he hated me. He was a monster because he was afraid to love me. Ifoma told me the terms. The covenant must be renewed every generation. I had 30 days. If I signed, the billions would remain mine. My future children would be rich, powerful, and utterly unloved. If I refused, we would be stripped bare. The banks would come. The shame would be public. The silent inheritance was now in my hands. For 29 nights, I sat on that balcony. I looked at my designer bags and felt like they were made of lead. I looked at the city and I realized I was a prisoner in a golden cage. I remembered my mother's sad eyes and realized she died of a broken heart because my father was too scared of poverty to hold her hand. Was $1 billion worth a life of eyes? Could I really sign away the souls of my unborn children for a car and a title? On the 30th day, I didn't go to the lawyer's office. I went back to that attic. I didn't use the key. I took a hammer and I smashed that trunk until the wood splintered like bone. I grabbed that cursed parchment, that piece of paper that had frozen my family for decades. My heart was pounding in my ears. The first time I had felt it beat that hard in years. I struck a match. Keep your money, I whispered. I'm taking back my voice. The room exploded in a light so bright, it felt like a physical weight. A scream that wasn't human echoed through the attic as the paper turned to ash. The shadows that had lived in the corners of my life for 25 years vanished in a heartbeat. I felt a heat rush through my chest, painful, searing, and then beautiful. The contract was gone, the debt was settled, but as the lights faded, I knew the Abuja princess was dead. The fall was fast. Within a month, the accounts were frozen, the cars were towed, the mansion was locked by the bank. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with Auntie Ifeoma. My friends stopped calling. My designer dresses were sold to pay for food. And you know what? I have never been happier. For the first time, the kitchen smells like onions and seasoning cubes, not just expensive emptiness. We talk, we argue, we cry, we are alive. So if you ever find yourself choosing between a life of gold and a life of warmth, remember my story. Money can build a house, but only love can make it a home. My father left me billions, but his greatest gift was the chance to lose it all. My name is Amara. I have no mansion, no security guards, and no designer bags, but I have my voice. And in this house, we don't do silence anymore. We sing.